members who have come out tonight to be part of this workshop. And we will begin this workshop with the Pledge of Allegiance. I will ask Councilmember Gatto to lead us in the pledge.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As mentioned, this is a special workshop, and actually a study session. And the purpose of this particular workshop is to discuss the storm drain management on behalf of the city of Lemon Grove. What I will do, I will turn this over to staff to kick off the presentation.
Thank you all for coming to the storm drain workshop or drainage workshop. The terms are going to be interchangeable. We're going to do our best to talk the loudest, but if you have cell phones, please silence your cell phones so we don't hear dings and rings as we're moving through this process. If you don't know, my name is Lydia Romero. I'm the city manager, and I will play moderator with the many staff that are here to talk about drainage and drainage master plans. In the back, we have Congresswoman Jacobs' office, and I know she's got, and he's got information for FEMA, so feel free, once this is over, to go quietly talk to them, or talk to them while we're doing the meeting, but very quietly. We have maps on the two locations, and in the event of an emergency, please exit either the side door over here, or these two exit doors. And if you need to use a restroom and you haven't been here, the restroom is through that hallway, men's first, women's second. So with all that out of the way, let me just share with you what a workshop format is. Most of you, if you've not been to a city council meeting, is a very formal business meeting. We have a strict agenda, we talk about what's on that agenda, we can't deviate. What a workshop does is a workshop allows us to dive into a single issue, to have a little bit of better give and take, to go more technical in nature. And in this case, most of you probably talked to public comment. Staff really isn't allowed to address comments after a speaker speaks. With a workshop, we can. So when we come to the public comment portion period, folks will come up here, we'll address staff. We will try our best after each speaker to answer your questions to the best of our ability. I do want to make one note. I know all of you are here interested in your property, your claim, your issue, which is really good. I ask you to redirect yourself to the process, either work with Izzy or work with our claim adjuster on your very specific project or address. We're not going to address it here. It's unfair for the others that did make it to talk about your issue and not their issue. So continue with the process and still work with Mr. Morgia on your specific issue that you have. And with that, I am going to introduce Izzy Morgia. He is our Public Works Director. He's been with the city for almost 2 years, and we're very proud to have him here. He's been spending many nights and weekends working on this issue on your behalf. Mr. Morgia.
Thank you, Madam City Manager, and welcome everyone to tonight's workshop, as Lydia referenced. On the screen, you see an outline of the discussion for tonight. As Lydia mentioned, I'm Izzy Morgia, the Public Works Director for the City of Lemon Grove. I also want to introduce the staff behind me who work for the city, and they are contracted through the city by Rick Engineering Company. I want to introduce Ed Walton, our city engineer, Andrew Cheese, project manager, and Brendan Hasty, principal for Rick Engineering. And they'll be discussing the section regarding the drainage master plan, which will be discussed here shortly. So here's tonight's roadmap. We're going to discuss storm drain system overview, just so that we all have an understanding of what a storm drain system is, background on the drainage system in Lemon Grove. Then we'll go and delve into the drainage master plan, and the Rick Engineering staff here will provide a high-level overview of the drainage master plan and how it pertains to us today. Then we're gonna delve into, we're gonna address the issue about public drainage versus private drainage systems. And then we'll conclude the presentation with storm damage assistance information, and then public comment, where we will address your questions. So as Lydia mentioned again, I know a lot of you here who I've spoken to, many of you on your particular issues. You know, if you're here for public comment, please keep your statements in general nature. Staff will be here after the meeting to discuss any particulars of your case. I know many of you I've been working with you one-on-one. If you have any updates, I'll be happy to entertain those as well. So what is a storm drain? Many of you may think of pipes and culverts when you think of a storm drain system. Some people may think that the storm drain system is also the sanitary sewer system. So you know, you flush your toilet and it ends up in the same place where the stormwater is. That's not the fact. It is different from a sanitary sewer system. A sanitary sewer system, you know, the effluent that is flushed down your toilets or down your sinks, that water ends up at a reclamation facility where it gets treated and then discharged out into the Pacific Ocean, or potentially to be reused. Stormwater in the storm drain system, the water or other liquids, contaminants that enter that drainage system essentially is runoff. Stormwater runoff from streets, buildings, rights of way, all that enters the storm drain system from various elements, either through infiltration from manholes, catch basins, curb inlets, which you know we'll see some pictures that will once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Also, unlike the sanitary sewer system, storm drain infrastructure is funded entirely through the general fund. It's not a ratepayer assisted system. So unlike your sanitary sewer system, you pay a yearly fee on your property tax that helps fund the maintenance and operation of a sanitary sewer system. For stormwater, that's not the case. It directly competes with other infrastructure elements like streets, facilities, parks, and you know, parks and recreation programs. All that, the maintenance and operation of this system competes directly with those other elements from the general fund. So as I've referenced, elements of a storm drain system, and these are just, you know, a few that I'm touching upon. Catch basins, storm drain inlets, outlets, manholes, and of course, the typical thing that you think of, pipes and culverts. A drainage system also consists of earthen channels, whether they be earthen or concrete, open channels, and then, of course, similar to pipes and culverts, the corrugated metal pipe segments. So here you have a curb inlet. This picture here is from the inside of a corrugated metal pipe. Here's an example of a channel. Catch basin or an inlet, which of course an inlet basin all capture water into a box, which then gets conveyed through the storm drain pipe or culvert system. And this picture here is an earthen channel, which is also part of a drainage system. So this slide here is a snapshot of the drainage master plan. There are charts around the room that have this graph blown up a bit, so you can see the city's inventory of the storm drain infrastructure. So drainage system components can be divided into broadly two categories: structures, so manholes, inlets, cleanouts, pipes themselves, of course, not pipes themselves, but that's under the conveyance section. Head walls, and then conveyance. The conveyance system is what actually transports the water through the system out into, whether that be, eventually out into the ocean. And we show this slide here. The importance of this slide is, as you can see, there are various elements to the storm drainage system, all play a very vital role to the conveyance of the water, but also to the integrity of the system. Just, as an example here, we have approximately almost 800 inlets, right? And each inlet, in order to be, to convey the most, or collect the most water as possible, has its own type of maintenance. So, during storm events, city staff, to the best of their ability, try to clean any debris off of storm drain inlets to ensure that enough water is being, enough water is going unobstructed into the basins and curb inlets. The city has a report it function. We've gotten several of emails saying, hey, there's a catch basin at this location, please send staff to come clear the grates off. Really appreciate that, it's very helpful. There should be an automatic response in our Report It app, and if we don't follow up with you immediately, please know that we do see it. I see it, I get copied on every reported issue, and if it's anything related to storm drain system, it gets prioritized, and I send it out to staff to get cleared immediately. And then lastly, with regards to this slide, again, just emphasizing that every element of the storm drain system has its own maintenance and rehabilitation needs, whether it's a manhole, whether it's an earthen ditch or channel. There are various maintenance needs that that each structure needs to have addressed. And then lastly, even though we're 3.0 plus square miles, we have a very complex and comprehensive drainage system, as will be discussed here shortly. So drainage history in Lemon Grove. So most of the development that is here with us today, a lot of the infrastructure, whether it be private residential homes, definitely a lot of the storm drain infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, lighting infrastructure, most of that infrastructure was installed or predates city incorporation. So city incorporation is 1977. When development occurred or was being built in Lemon Grove in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s, when we're talking about particular subdivisions, where many of you live today, the owners or the developers of those subdivisions offered improvements for dedication to the public, to the county for acceptance. That is the process and nature for development. You want to build residential in the community. There are certain requirements that you have to meet from the public agency, and that, of course, when those improvements are done, that private developer then turns over those improvements over to whether it be the county or the city. What we're finding is in many cases the county accepted offers of dedication for streets, lighting, but has expressly rejected the offer of dedication for storm drainage easements. Most often than not, the county has rejected those easements that the subdivision had offered to the county. This was a standard response by the county when approving subdivisions back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even 70s. Don't really know what the reason behind that is, other than they didn't have they weren't required to accept those drainage easements. It was a requirement of development, but it did not translate into a requirement to accept those infrastructure improvements. Up here on the slide, you'll just see an example of a subdivision map. So wherever you live, you have a map associated to the parcel in which you reside. And usually, not usually, but the developer at the time has a name for the subdivision. Usually it's their last name, but in most cases might not be. But here's just a cover sheet of a subdivision map, and obviously it's difficult to see, but in essence, what you need to know is usually the private developer will have this section here is usually from the private developer where it will state where the subdivision occurs or resides in, what kind of improvements exist, and their dedication of those improvements over to the public. Then there's a statement somewhere in the document from the clerk of the board of the Board of Supervisors, or if we're talking about present day, the city clerk on behalf of the city council will have a statement accepting those improvements, and they could be one for one. So subdivision developer dedicates a street, and the public agency accepts the street. In this case here, as you can see, so the clerk of the board of the supervisor of San Diego County has approved on this map, has accepted on behalf of the public, and in this example is Coe Street, as dedicated on this map. And usually on page 2 or page 3, you will have a map of whether it be the cul-de-sac or the various parcels related to that subdivision. As dedicated on this map, Coe Street, and has rejected on behalf of the public the drainage easements and those portions of whatever lots are noted on that map, designated for reserve, future street, etc. And so, as I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of these instances where the county has rejected various easements throughout the city, and there are numerous subdivisions in the city. If you are a developer and you wanted to parcel out one lot or subdivide a one lot, you would be required to go through the subdivision map process. And in that process, you would indicate any easements that are required of you as part of development. So in a lot of these instances, again, I work with many of you here in this room with regards to your particular instances. Unfortunately, and this is just not Lemon Grove, it's not a Lemon Grove issue. It's common in agencies throughout the county and the state, but there is not a, how do I say this? There's not a good inventory of private easements that exist within a community. The process to identify private easements and then identify whether they're public or private, it is an arduous task. And the city's approach or staff's approach historically has been dealing with each case, with each situation on a case-by-case basis. And so this slide here essentially kind of describes the process that many of you are going through right now. So if there is a drainage concern on your property, or you've experienced flooding, or you have a sinkhole, or whatever the instance is, obviously your first step is to contact the city. The city will respond by doing a site inspection, seeing if there's an immediate safety concern to your property. You know, in some cases, we'll send out the building inspector to see if your structure is, if it's safe or not. And then the building inspector will also provide an assessment or recommendation, not a recommendation, but assessment of the cause of whatever you're expressing. From there, staff will take that site inspection and do further research. So the maps that you previously saw on the slide, that is our go-to point. We'll delve into the maps, try to determine whether or not there is an easement on the property. In some cases there are, but also in some cases they're not, which definitely complicates the situation. But the subdivision maps is you know, route number one, what we look to. Just as you saw in the previous slide with the language regarding acceptance or rejected language, you know, that points us into, that gives us our first indication of responsibility and ownership. However, staff doesn't stop there. We don't say, oh, it's, you know, at least in current practice under, since I've been here. Obviously, we're learning a lot about historical easements, but we will also look at recorded documents. So again, just because your subdivision map was approved in the 1960s and it may have been rejected, any easements may have been rejected, you may have a recorded easement that may have occurred during one of the prior owners of your house, or the city at some time might have accepted those easements, in which case would have pursued a recorded easement on the property. And so we will look at, we will ask you for your title report. If you have a copy of your title report, look at usually the exclusions page. We'll know any easements on the property. There is a caveat. Just because your title report says, you know, there is a drainage easement on the property, the key word is you know, it's whether or not it's accepted or not. Just because your title report says that there's an easement on the property, that is a good thing. It gives us another aspect to look at with regards to ownership and responsibility. But usually, that easement has a recorded document number. And that recorded document number will tie back to, or it's the title, the number of the easement, and it will indicate any maintenance responsibilities, essentially the the do's and don'ts of the easement for the property. In addition to looking at your title report, you know, again, depending on the situation, if you don't have a title report on hand, as part of our process, we do order a title report as part of our due diligence. But we also, if we're not finding any results, and, we will look at the surrounding properties as well. There could be a case where your, there may not be a recorded easement on your property, but your neighbor may have a recorded easement. And so, we will double check, wherever the issue is, the surrounding properties around where the concern is, to ensure that we're looking at, any adjacent property where, an easement may have been recorded. And then lastly, those documents will, in essence, provide us some guidance on ownership and responsibility. But also, one would have to be prepared that if there is no recorded, no additional recorded easements, and the map language is all that there is, then that is the result. The result of it being distinguished from a public drainage system versus a private drainage system. So, one of the big endeavors that a city can undertake is assessing their infrastructure and seeing what condition it is in, to help prioritize improvements in the future, help staff it with prioritization of projects for the future and as part of our budget process. Just like our pavement management program, our sewer master plan, our sidewalk master plan, all those master plans have recommendations and prioritizations to help staff identify future projects, and also to pursue funding, whether it's grants or mostly grants in our particular case. But in order to be competitive for grants, you need to come with a project in hand and some cost estimates and an idea of what is it that you're getting funding for. And the Drainage Master Plan is certainly an example of that related to the storm drain infrastructure. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Andrew, who will provide a high-level overview of the Drainage Master Plan. He has a couple slides here, and then we'll transition back to the city staff. So Andrew?
All right, thank you, Izzy. All right, so as Izzy was discussing, a drainage master plan is simply just a way of scientifically prioritizing your improvements throughout the city. It's putting everything on an even scale and then weighing your priorities across the city. So instead of phone calls, you actually look at it in a modeling perspective and see where the biggest issues are holistically across the city. And so in order to accomplish that, what we do is we create a digital twin of the city. So we take all of the infrastructure that the city has, so all their storm drains, channels, all the way to the inlets. And the more data you have, the better the model will be, and the more accurate results will provide. So incorporating everything that is possible to convey from the inlets all the way to the outfall of the city. So here on the right is kind of the workflow to go through a typical drainage master plan, and that includes looking at the data, so combining all of the assets into one GIS map, so it's kind of a virtual twin or digital twin of the infrastructure, and then we model the existing drainage model. So what that does is it kind of sensitivity analysis for where the system fails. So we run different storm events. So in this instance, it was a 2-year storm event, which is roughly a 50% chance of happening every year. And then we run a 10-year storm event, which is roughly a 10% per year that'll happen. And then a 100-year storm event, which is roughly 1% that'll happen within a year. And then as a parallel effort to that, we also did a CCTV inspection of all of the CMP storm drains throughout the city, since we know that's kind of a pain point in many locations throughout Southern California. Failing infrastructure is in storm drain world, kind of the CMP. And then we identify those drainage infrastructure recommendations. So what size do those storm drains need to be from a capacity standpoint to convey a level of service that's adequate for the city? So that's kind of, I'll discuss in the next slide, but then we go into recommendations, we model those, and we see what they've done to improve the city's drainage infrastructure. So how do we take the extent of the inundation, which is the flooding, how do we take that and we reduce it to where it's within the right of way? So what is required to make that happen? And so you can run multiple simulations to be able to accommodate, you see the kind of the balance between if you're subsurface and surface storage can convey the 100-year event. And then as part of that, it's then bundling those into projects and providing cost estimates and prioritization. Prioritization happens, there's a lot of ways of doing it. It's primarily about the impacts of what each of those deficiencies have. So how many structures are impacted? What is the severity of those impacts? When roadways are being obstructed? What paths of travel are being obstructed? And they're all weighed based on a set list of prioritization metrics. And so as I was discussing, the regulatory framework really is for the city. It's for a 100-year event. It's the combination of the storm drains and the right-of-way to convey the full value. So as long as the water stays within the right-of-way, that's at capacity for a 100-year event. And then for high-resolution GIS data, you can see the map. A large effort is put in just mapping everything. It's not there, it's not available all over. It's something that you have to make sure is horizontally and vertically corrected to be able to model. And so it's a pretty large effort to just get the existing inventory into place. And then on top of that, you have to determine what area is going where. So what this shows is a bunch of squiggly lines, but what it really is showing is what's the drainage area to each inlet throughout the city. So what's contributing to what inlet? And so what that's used for is every drainage area has different kind of parameters. So how much impervious land cover there is, so how much sidewalks, roadways, structures are in that subcatchment will determine how much runoff is received by that inlet. The more pervious surface in a subcatchment, the less runoff it'll receive, because pervious, so basically if the water can hit open ground or grass, it's going to infiltrate into the ground more readily than if it hits sidewalks and cement and roofs. Like I mentioned, there's a parallel effort. It was CCTV of all corrugated metal pipes throughout the city. So this is with that, we're able to distinguish what priority score they were given. So if it's a 1, it's minor, there's not much damage to it, it's pretty good condition, it's ready to go. A 5 score would be the most severe. That's really if they have collapse or have large holes in the sides of them. And then we came up with a summary of the repair techniques as well. So whether it's lining, replacement, shower, or cleaning, those are all part of this effort. As I mentioned, the existing condition modeling, it's holistic, it's citywide, it's all done on the same scale, so you can see where the real impacts throughout the city. And this is one kind of glimpse of the infrastructure. It's a dual drainage model, which basically means that we model not just the subsurface, so the storm drain that's going underground, but we model what's happening on the ground as well. So where is that runoff going? So is it storing in a sump? Is it conveying downstream if there's slope on the street? And that's what you see in the dark purple to light blue, is what's being stored on the surface. So, what's the result of all of this? Really, it's determining where the city's at as far as level of service. So, from this effort, you can see that in a 2-year storm event, which is, again, a 50% chance of happening every year. Roughly 85% of the system has capacity, and only 15% is deficient. And that deficiency can vary from if it's going within the right of way, it's not necessarily impacting structure at that level. So the 10-year, roughly 75% has capacity, 25% deficient, and then in the 100-year, roughly 61% has capacity and 40% is deficient. As I mentioned, as a part of the proposed condition, we do model these with recommendations. So for each core area, we recommend a set of projects that will relieve the system. And so this is one location where if you saw, this is Broadway, if you saw that previously, Broadway was entirely inundated during a 100-year event, and now it's just within kind of the shoulder of one of the lanes. And so through this effort, we came up with the top 5 projects, which are along Federal and Broadway primarily, and those had the most impacts to the city. And then we came up with a list of 42 total projects that are bundled and kind of throughout the city in each watershed. And then the total cost of all these improvements is roughly $78 million. And then kind of a little analysis on the side, for that January 22nd storm event, this is one screenshot of the weather pattern going through the city. And what this shows is the cell of the storm is that red, sort of orange, and then yellow and green kind of as it dissipates out. So the yellow and orange, you can see it right over Lemon Grove. Oh, so this is, the yellow and orange as they come across Lemon Grove. And Spring Valley over here got hit. The storm was kind of going west to east, kind of in this direction. And really from that, it's roughly we look in our world, we look at what is going to impact the infrastructure in the city, and from a 15-minute time of concentration, or 15-minute duration, so storm duration to roughly an hour would be the most impactful on the city's infrastructure, and that's anywhere from a 200 to 500 year storm event.
Thank you, Andrew.
So while Izzy's getting himself transitioned to the next portion of our meeting, for those of you that are interested in looking at the storm drain master plan, it is up on our website. It's a large PDF and it'll take a little while to download. We have 2 copies that we have printed here for you all if you want to peruse it and take a look at it. It is a highly technical document, but the executive summary is actually very enlightening and very good if you're interested in reading what that executive summary says. So on our website under the Public Works Department.
Okay, so as Andrew explained, a big part of the drainage master plan is assessing the city's infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and one of the challenges historically has been identifying and repairing those failed sections of culvert pipes or zoning in on particular improvements to alleviate the system, as Andrew mentioned. The drainage master plan, again, it's a couple years old, was accepted and finalized in 2020, but it is the first step in identifying projects and getting projects funded and moving forward. Again, as Andrew mentioned, there are 42 recommended projects that was recommended as part of the improvements, ranging anywhere from $25,000 all the way, I think, up to it was like $10 or $11 million is one of the most expensive projects. Keeping in mind that those projects are they include various segments, and so that doesn't include spot repairs that may come up on a given in a given year, or day, and month. Another second challenge is funding. So on average, the city budgets, or historically has budgeted about $200,000 in storm drain maintenance or repairs, and that funding has come from the gas tax fund, and Transnet funding, and so that funding has been allocated for storm drain repairs, so that in essence, any general fund money is shored up to go to other programs and infrastructure. Prior to January 22nd, streets were a big priority, and so streets takes up a major portion of the gas tax and Transnet funding, about depending on any given year, but anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000, with storm drains taking about $100,000 for each of those funds. So Transnet and gas tax as separate funds. Staffing is a challenge as well. When the city incorporated, or since incorporation, storm drain maintenance has been handled and absorbed through the street maintenance division and sanitation division, and contracted out. Whether it's storm drain replacement, which is usually handled through a third party. But unlike other communities, which may have full-blown stormwater divisions, Lemon Grove does not. Regulatory requirements. Again, as I mentioned, one part of the drainage system is our earthen channels. So Main Street Channel, Bakersfield between Ensenada and Canton is one of the big channels in the community. Citronella is a small little channel, but it conveys water under Lemon Grove Ave. All those various, and of course, Choyas Creek. John, gotta mention that one for you. So all those various channels, are a part of the conveyance system, and they also have their maintenance needs. But it's important to note that some of those channels are not controlled or owned by the city. And so it's difficult. One of the challenges is difficult. It's difficult to get the property owner to have those earthen channels maintained, to either remove those Mexican fan palms, vegetation, invasives, to allow water to convey efficiently through the system. For those areas that do belong to the city, we are faced with regulatory requirements. We have to, in some instances, have to abide by Army Corps of Engineer permitting requirements, Regional Water Quality Control Board, California Department of Fish and Game. Each of those regulatory agencies have a stake in those respective channels, either because of various biospecies or plant material. So we simply can't just go in and start removing and hacking away at vegetation. So working with each of those individual agencies is a challenge, and costly as well to get permits in place. The next few slides we're gonna address public drainage versus private systems. And we touched upon it at the beginning of the presentation, but we're just gonna kind of reiterate and go a little bit in depth to help you identify, you know, whether you live in a single-family home, the subdivision that you live in, or for future reference as well. But again, depending on the location, drainage systems may either be publicly maintained if they were accepted, or they may be maintained by a private owner, i.e. resident or homeowners association. And so really here, this is just a flow chart, how to determine whether or not a drainage feature is public or private. First and foremost, are there any, as I mentioned earlier, are there any easements on my property? Yes. If they were accepted, then drainage is publicly maintained. You know, the city doesn't know everything that exists out there. So I've certainly come through situations where you know, we've been working with homeowners and identify, like, yes, there is a public drainage easement here, and we found the document, and the city will definitely take ownership of those situations. On the flip side, private drainage. Again, referring back to those original maps, and absent any recorded easements, was it accepted? No. The language should clearly say, if it's rejected, then it is a privately maintained system. If you do not have, if you have some type of drainage facility and the subdivision map is unclear, meaning there's no direct language specifying drainage easement at all, but you know that one is there, staff will work with you to help come to a conclusion as to whether that is a public drainage system or private drainage system. And there's only a very few handful in those situations that we're dealing with. Again, this is just a different version of the slide earlier. Typical acceptance language on the left-hand side, and then typical rejection language on the right-hand side. And so, you know, typically you'll see streets being accepted, utility easements, sewer easements. Again, sewer easements are different than drainage easements. If you have a sewer easement, which I know there's a lot of sewer easements in this community, a sewer easement essentially, you know, it provides the city access to that property. You may have a manhole or a pump station in worst cases on your property that guarantees or that allows city access to maintain that infrastructure. If you have a drainage easement on the property, you know, the drainage easement you know, will dictate what the city can and cannot do, but usually there's a maintenance component to those easements. So, you know, clearing the conveyance system, whether it be an earthen channel or a ditch, brow ditch, or whatnot. Again, this is a repeat of the earlier slide, just as a real world example. And I'm not going to beat this one to death, so we'll move on. Here's an example of an accepted drainage easement. Again, they're few and far between, but they are out there. So in this example, I don't have the subdivision map name, but this is the subdivision related to the McKnight and Mount Vernon area. So In this example here, this is essentially, what you would see on the second or third page of a subdivision map. Any easements that are identified in, subsequent pages, you'll have to look really closely. Some of these documents are super old, but, here outlined in red on this parcel, you'll see a 6-foot drainage easement. It gives you, the distance, as it relates to this parcel or this lot here, number 17. And again, going back to, the city's approach when we were looking at situations on a case-by-case basis, this is an example of what we're looking for. We're looking at the original map, to the subdivision. We're looking for easements, that tie back to, the front page of the subdivision and the acceptance and or rejection language. So in this case, here the clerk of the board, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, has accepted, this map, on behalf of the public, McKnight Drive and portions of Massachusetts Avenue and Mount Vernon Street and drainage easement as dedicated on this map. And so, that, again, bingo, this is public drainage. It's city's responsibility here in this example. I was just thinking of this other example. There are situations out there where, again, where if you have a drainage easement and it's unclear, because it's not specific, it might say something to the effect of, the Board of Supervisors, has approved this map, on behalf of the public, and it's, the portions of the streets, but there's no mention of any street drainage, and so we'll work with, our city attorney to help provide guidance whether or not that is an implied acceptance or not. So in this example, this is the same example, so, or same area, so Mount, McKnight, following that same flow chart, the residents here in this area brought to the city's attention a couple years ago, flooding issues. Staff did their research, identified in the map that it was accepted public easement, developed a project to improve the drainage in that area, and whenever possible, whenever feasible, the city's practice is to move any drainage facilities from private property out into the right of way. Again, if it's an accepted drainage easement and wherever possible and feasible. So in this case, you saw earlier where you have some drainage facilities here, and so the improvement consisted of moving that drainage facility out onto McKnight, and the project further had some drainage facilities on Mount Vernon to reroute the flow going this way out here in this area. So, this slide is talking about conversion of private drainage to public. And this slide essentially, it's meant to kind of provide you an overview of what the requirements would be if there was a situation. Again, every situation is going to be specific and unique to each individual case. But if the city has made or come to a decision, or I should say, decision to accept any private drainage facilities and make them public, here are some of the requirements and processes that the private residences would have to go through. So, first and foremost, you know, if we were going to make any improvements and accept any private drainage easements, there would have to be a recorded easement. And I'll show you an example here in a bit. But the recorded easement would run in perpetuity with the property, as long as it's not abdicated or abandoned, but usually runs in perpetuity with the property. It identifies any areas of responsibility or whether or not it's just access rights. Usually with an easement, especially if it's storm drain related, you're gonna be prohibited from making any improvements on that easement. So you take, you know, in many of these cases, you have, you know, a 24-inch pipe running along your property. You take, you know, 24-inch pipe, you know, each easement at least 6 feet, 10 to 6 feet. You're gonna be prohibited from making any improvements on that width of land. This includes, you know, walls can be put up, any fence, trees, etc., because you don't want to compromise the integrity of the structure underneath the ground. Usually our easements also include unobstructed 24/7 access, you know, for any maintenance issues, inspections, emergency repairs. Again, this is very common with easements. You know, essentially it's allowing us to come on your property without any notification, because we need to. And then drainage structures on easement property, you know, it's obviously something to take into consideration. You know, depending on your particular lot, the drainage easement might prohibit you from building an ADU in the future just because it's in there's an easement going across your property. So those are just some of the considerations with regards to converting a private drainage into a public drainage system, and some of the things that the city will require if we go through that process. This slide here is just an example of a grantee for storm drainage easement. Again, you know, identifying what the easement's for. So in this particular case, maintaining, operating, inspecting, repairing, not just the storm drain, but any particular structures on the property. And so, you know, again, you may have an easement, and as part of that process, we may require to have a manhole on the property to access and maintain that facility. And so it might not be very appealing to the homeowner because you have a manhole in the middle of your property, but that is sometimes required. And then here down at the bottom, again, it's just an example of, you know, again, specifying that any prohibitions against the improvement of any particular land on that property.
So I'm gonna punt this over to our deputy city attorney. This is Tim Hampion. He also serves as our planning commission city attorney. So Tim, we put the $1 million question on the slide for you. And I thought it would be best that the attorney answer this question as opposed to city staff. Tim.
Lydia, thank you. Mayor, council members, and members of the public, good evening. This is obviously the question that many of you may be wondering about. I want to be clear that I'm not here to speak about any particular circumstances or incidents or anything like that. I'm here simply to give a state of the law And that includes, can private funds of a city be used to repair or fix private property? And the general answer to that is no, unfortunately. According to the California Constitution, doing so would amount to a gift of public funds. So it's basically taking taxpayer money and just giving it to somebody else without any proper legal basis for it. And that is specifically prohibited both in the Constitution and various statutory authority in the state. So it's not as simple as, can you just come and fix something on my property? The city simply cannot do that. It's not restricted to storm drains, that's just a general rule about the expenditure of city funds and so forth. So I realize that that is a general answer, and that is all that I can give under the circumstances, and this being a workshop. But I hope that gives mayor, council, and everybody else a sense of why the city's doing what it is doing, and what it can do and what it cannot do.
Just to follow up with that, there's a reason why Mr. Murguia and his predecessor take so long to work with each individual property owner to go to the very end of the road to ensure that we can be there to help you, to ensure that we can be there to perhaps accept the private drainage. That is not always the case, but we try really hard to work with individual property owners to help convert private drainage to public drainage when it makes perfect sense. And there is no right answer, there is no model that we use, because each case in each situation is very different with very different particular facts. I can't say it serves 15 streets, so it becomes a public drainage. That really has to go into the case of facts, in which the engineering team and gentlemen that are way smarter than me make that calculus and make that recommendation to myself, and then we make that recommendation to the city council.
Next slide.
So, funding is the big question, right? Dollars, money. There are opportunities out there for sure. Keep in mind we have that $78 million figure. You know, that's 2020 dollars. Since probably 85 million at this point to do those projects. But you know, staff, whenever possible, looks at opportunities to apply for funding, to put projects together and compete for funding. So grants related, you know, whether it's through the State Water Resources Board, the Hazardous Mitigation Grant, you know, FEMA, after every presidentially declared disaster, sets aside money after every declared disaster for mitigation. And those are funding opportunities that the city certainly can pursue. Keep in mind that that's a nationwide program, so we're competing against other agencies in the state, county, and also at the national level. One of the important things with regards to grants, you know, you may have a project where I'm just repairing one segment of whether it be, you know, a 60-inch CMP, a corrugated metal pipe. Well, you know, every agency and their mother has a 60-inch corrugated metal pipe, you know, so really grants are looking at, is your project worthy of funding? What's the benefit cost analysis? Is the money, you know, FEMA has this calculation where they won't fund a project using this benefit cost analysis if the result is less than one, meaning is the funds that the FEMA's giving you gonna be worth the mitigation risk that it will prevent any future damage. And if your project doesn't rate higher than, you know, 1, you're not gonna be looked at. Loans, definitely that's an opportunity for city staff to look at. The water, state revolving fund, which usually addresses, water, distribution, which obviously we don't have, we're not a purveyor here, that's Helix Water District, but we do have sanitation. There might be loan programs. Similarly, you know, if the council wanted to look at this in the future, implementing some type of infrastructure bond measure, this would go to the voters at large in Lemon Grove, and would require a 2/3 requirement. So it's a very hefty, or very high standard to get a bond measure approved to address specific infrastructure such as storm drains. Assessment districts, community facility districts, again, if you have, if there are particular areas that we know have drainage issues, there could be assessment districts or community facility districts that could be organized, where funds would be collected on an annual basis through the tax roll process, that the city would collect, for specific purposes. And again, that is very property specific, So, as, you know, if the city were to go down that process is, has to adhere to the Prop 218 process. Many of you may have heard Prop 218, which is a voter approval process. So if a majority of residents or voters vote down any type of facility district or assessment, in essence, that district can't be formed.
So before we leave the grants portion of it, this city tries to use other people's money as effectively as possible, which means we go after as much as we can of what we call other people's money to do the grant. We have even outreached in certain areas for certain infrastructure projects, not necessarily storm drains, to the city of San Diego to be a partner because of our jurisdictional boundaries. We've reached out to the county to be a partner with them on some infrastructure, again, because of jurisdictional boundaries. Part of it is on my side, part of it is on their side. We need to have a full grant that the city would be the lead at, so we can then fix the infrastructure between both entities. I will tell you that it's easier to work with the county of San Diego than it is to work with the city of San Diego. And so we continue those efforts, as well as looking internally of where we can get all of the grant money. So we are constantly on the search. I do have a staff member that is dedicated 2/3 of his time, is searching for, assessing, and then giving us grant assessments, and then staff writes them that are the experts that we go out in the field. So we spend a lot of time searching for money to fix some of our monumental problems, like trying to chip away at that 78 million drainage price tag, so we could deliver those services cost effectively for the residents.
So before we conclude the presentation, again, I know many of you here have experienced specific storm damage, and so this slide here again is just a reminder of that FEMA has opened the application process for residents to file a damage claim. The application deadline is April 19th. You can visit online the webpage here and fill out the application. The application is pretty simple and quick. FEMA staff has ensured that it's a quick and efficient process. As soon as you complete your application, within 7 to 10 days, you will be contacted by one of their inspectors to confirm the damage that you're claiming. From there, it will take them, again, they said 7 to 10 business days for them to write up their reports and go through the approval process in order to provide assistance to any individuals that experience damage during January storm events. In some instances, in speaking with residents, they've already received funding, and they explained that the process was pretty quick. In some cases, they, you know, may not, you know, again, it's a process that, handles with FEMA, but we've had meetings with them, and they've explained, that they're gonna make this process as efficient as possible, so, April 19th is the deadline. If you've experienced damage, whether it's the property or personal belongings, you know, please submit a claim through that.
And then on the back table, there's also documentation from, the assessor's office, Jordan Marks. If you need to have your property reassessed, or you need to have some type of property tax relief, there's an application there, fairly easy to fill out, and then you mail it in. You can also go to his website and fill it in from the website, and then it'll get transmitted electronically. So those forms are there for your taking. And then last slide, we are now moving into the public comments. I had a quick conversation with the mayor earlier, and I asked her if we give deference to the people that are here, and have them speak first prior to the elected officials asking questions. So I hope you're all okay with that, because there's a lot of people that want to talk with us, and we try to make this presentation as fast as possible, so we can get as many questions in as fast as possible and get answers to the community. So the city clerk has the speaker slips to give to the mayor. Feel free to stand up where you are to make your public comment, or if you want to come and address us through the podium, you certainly can do that as well. It's entirely up to you. It's a very relaxed format. And again, staff won't address your specific issues. Hang around, talk to staff afterwards if you've got a very specific issue you want to talk about. We will answer general comments, and if you ask a specific issue, we'll try and transform it into more of a general comment based on that, on your question. We also have my senior analyst is in the back. He's taking down the questions, so at the end of the day, we can put a frequently asked questions that have come and that arose through this process up on our website in the event that you want to review it again, or you want to share it with your neighbors and friends. So, Madam Mayor, do you have the speaker slips?
I do not.
The clerk is bringing them to you.
There's a lot of people who've never been here, and I thought this was actually gonna be more of a conversation like we had at Password.
And that's what it is. So after they speak, we'll have a conversation. We'll talk with the residents.
So can you please explain to them how to fill out a speaker slip
Oh,
where they are?
yeah, I'm so sorry. If you haven't filled out a speaker slip, that just is an orderly fashion for people to talk. It's not a requirement. They're on the table, give them to the clerk will give them to the mayor. The mayor will call your name, and then just, again, get up where you're at and speak to us. And if you prefer, you can come right up here and speak to us at the podium. Either way that you're comfortable, that would be perfect. So, Madam Mayor, I hand it over to you, and we'll stand ready to answer questions.
Thank you so very much. And before we get to these speaker slips, I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight to hear about our storm drain system, and to hear and get a better understanding of how things work. And I know that everyone has been impacted in a way unlike no other. And this storm that occurred was not a 5-year storm, a 10-year storm, not even a 100-year storm. It was actually a 1,000-year storm. And just like you were impacted, guess what? I was impacted too. And I say that because on that day, when the bulk of the rain came down, I was actually on my way to physical therapy and got caught at Massachusetts and Broadway in the torrential rain. And it rained so much that there was city staff right at the Albertsons entrance off of Broadway directing people to go into the center to get out of the rain. City staff was up to their knees in water, and water was intruding in the vehicle that I was sitting in. In fact, my friend who was driving me to physical therapy, the car was impacted in a negative way. But not only that, in my own personal home, there was so much water that gathered hazard in my backyard that the water started to intrude in my home. So just know that we're all in this together and that we've all been impacted in a way unlike no other. I want to go ahead and start with the speaker slips. If you have not filled out one yet and you have questions, please do so now so that I can get that slip. And that way staff can answer your questions, address your concerns, but also just know that you'll have the opportunity to speak to staff after the meeting. I'll start with Debbie, and I believe it's Telly.
Debbie Thayes.
Tell it.
Thayes.
Tell it. I apologize if I said your last name wrong. Followed by Brenda Hammond.
I live on Central Avenue, kind of between New Jersey and Massachusetts, where everything comes from New Jersey and Fisher Lane down into my property, from San Miguel down Corona. It comes into 2 storm drains on the corner of Corona and Central. The drain pipe for those 2 storm drains go underneath the road. There's a PVS pipe that runs 26 feet onto my property where that water lets out. You guys want to say it's on private property? You can't clean it? I clean the storm drains. I clean the trash out on the road. I have to clean that pipe. But you want to run all that water through a little tiny cobblestone trench. I'm in a subdivision from 1892. This is a little tiny trough, not even as big as my foot across, and you are downpouring total runoff from the streets plus the storm drains. I had 18 inches of standing water on my property. There's an illegal barrier behind my property that city has known about for 20 plus years now. And I've had them come out and say, yes, it wasn't legally, yes, there's no permits, oh yeah, look at zigzag. Nothing's been done. I've been told, oh, we didn't accept it. But being told here tonight, you've looked at deeds, you've done that, I haven't gotten any answers beyond being told we didn't accept it. Well, if this drainage pipe is 26 feet onto my property, how about you guys come and remove it or I'll clog it up? Then I won't have the water. I'll just barricade my property in so that water doesn't come in and it can sit on Central. I'm not getting answers. And Izzy here is saying, I've been working. I have been working with the city since December of 22. I have done all of the engineering people. Every time I've kind of let it slide, but since December of 22, I have had at least 30 plus conversations. And I finally, after all these years, get an answer as, well, we didn't accept it, but I can't get that in writing. I can't get anything. Come on. I've had the council people come out. From the street, it looks fine. Come inside and look at this. You guys, I've got pictures here. Come look at them, the amount of water that is being diverted. I also have 3 fire hydrants that Helix comes out and pressurized tests them. Guess where that water goes when they do it? My yard. You can ask Helix how many times I've gone out and stopped them and said, I'll call City Hall, I'll call the cops on you for flooding my property if you open those things. That doesn't stop them from hitting them. It floods me out all the time. You can say this is a 1,000-year flood, but since 2017, I have flooded out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. To me, that's not a 1,000-year flood. And I have asked and asked, and you change engineers, they all come out, stand in my yard, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. I never hear from them again. In 22, I started the process again. Izzy can attest to that. Pablo can attest that. Pablo's come out and stood in the rain and watched the flow. When we had that flood on the 22nd, I came to City Hall and said, I just want somebody to come verify and take your own pictures to see how much water is there. And she goes, sorry,
private property. Have a nice day. Tell you, that wasn't the comment to make to me at that time. This isn't gonna slide any longer. It needs, that's when I called you, Jennifer, and you were in Utah. I wanted somebody to come see what this flooding does.
Thank you so much for providing your, your comments. I am going to check with staff to see if there is an immediate response now, or if there's not an immediate response, then perhaps staff can follow up with you, so I'll check.
I thank Debbie for her comments, and there are particular issues that are pertaining to her instance that I can't comment tonight, and so I'll follow up with her.
Thank you. And the great part about having a workshop is that we can actually have dialogue. When we have our formal city council meetings, we can't chat because it is formal. But you know, I think that we all have to really come to a space and a place to know that the city of Lemon Grove wasn't built in 8 years or 10 years. And the city of Lemon Grove has a very rich history. And even before it was incorporated as a city, the pipes, the infrastructure, the streets were all put in place prior to this city even materializing. But we have what we have today, and there is a hefty backlog of maintenance and improvement projects that are necessary for the city, and the funding to take care of the infrastructure needs is not there. I don't know if you were listening, I took notes, but it was mentioned, was it $78 million for storm drains? $78 million for storm drains, and our annual budget, our general fund budget, is $18.5 million. And so, it creates a dilemma. And this is just storm drains. We're not even talking about streets. Because the streets, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a $55 million backlog of streets that need maintenance and improvements. And that didn't happen in 8 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. So, you know, just kind of, you know, think about that, because as a city, we need to come up with creative ways to not only maintain the operation of our city, but also creative ways to improve the infrastructure of our city. I'm gonna go ahead and call on Brenda Hammond,
If I might.
and followed by,
If I might, one of the things that I think, the example of Mateus, is that, one of the slides was, can we use public funds to support private projects?
Thank you.
And the answer was generally no.
Yeah.
But it is not as clear cut as that. As Izzy explained, there's a number of things that we look at when we're trying to make that determination. So if the city attorney and the deputy city attorney could speak to that issue, what are some of the rubrics that we consider when we're deciding whether or not a drainage that may be on private property, perhaps we are directing water from the city and collecting it through there? What are those circumstances where we might have an interest because the public entity is directing water onto the private property? Is that an example of where it's not just quite that clear cut and we're digging into it?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to not be quite specific to your factual scenario, but as a general proposition, money must be specifically earmarked for certain purposes, if you're as opposed to general fund money. So money can be earmarked for certain purposes. There must be certain findings that are made, such as there's a public necessity, or this is for the public good, and make certain findings towards that, and whether a particular scenario fits, can be made those findings. and that those findings are defensible, if they were to be challenged, is very fact-specific. And that is, and I'm speaking more specifically to if the city was looking to fund certain improvements that might incorporate elements of private land, for example. But it's very fact-specific, and that's why I said generally.
Okay.
But it's not something that it's gonna take some work to do, a great deal of consideration, and will require the professionals here to do some very deep analysis to understand whether it's legally defensible and something that can be done.
And so I also want you all to know that there's a process. One of the frustrations that she expressed was that she wasn't getting any answers in writing. There is actually a claims process. You can file a notice of claims. I know this isn't exciting to hear from the city perspective, because that means that, you know, we're gonna have to have like attorneys involved, and it's gonna get costly, but that's how you force the issue to get your answer in writing. It also is helpful to us because that's also, that notice of claims process allows us to provide it to our insurance carriers.
Okay, and nobody has told me that over 20+ years.
And so that's why we're
They
here
say,
today.
go talk to City Hall, go talk to maintenance, go do this, go do that. I've done that. I've got copies of everything. And you guys say, oh, well, get this, oh, the city is working on that. Well, not with me. They just keep saying private property, private property. Those aren't answers.
Yeah, so that's something that you'll, again, like, this isn't.
Well, my idea is just to plug up that damn pipe with a bunch of cement and just flat out Central. All the water that runs through my yard goes down my yard, that illegal divert goes down West Street, goes to Broadway, and goes to Massachusetts and Broadway. And I get at least enough water, standing water in my backyard for 3 full-size swimming pools. My property is 100 feet across and 300 feet long, and you're talking 200 feet times 100 of 18 inches plus of water.
So I want to go ahead and interrupt here, because this is the opportunity for everyone to be heard. And staff has already mentioned that they will be available to talk to people specifically about their own individual questions or their own individual issues. So please, I'll ask the elected officials to hold your questions and comments until after the people who took time out to come here, so that we can hear from them. And then, you know, if we can answer their questions now, we will. And if not right now, then staff can follow up with them. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to Brenda Hammond, followed by Donna Wood.
All right, really quickly, in the absence of a timer, I will be keeping track of time. So when you have 1 minute left, just go ahead and throw this order up here. And then when your time is up, then I'll flip it over to the red side.
Is it 3 minutes each
Is that
person?
really necessary? Because I thought that was the whole point of having a public workshop, is that we could just let people talk.
No, that's not how this works, Allison. That's why I've asked that we agendize
This
this.
portion is for
makes no
public
difference.
comment and for the individuals to ask their questions. We do not want to take that away from you. And so please respect the public's ability to speak. And yes, we are gonna put a limit on it because we wanna make sure that you're specific with your questions. And 3 minutes is a lot of time. But also, if you want to talk to staff about your specific situation, then staff is gonna be here for you. So I am gonna move on to Brenda Hammond, thank you. And feel free to come up to the podium so that everyone can see you, but also hear your questions.
So I'm
And speak loud,
I'm not gonna
please.
get into details, but I have to hold on to something right here, I can't. Lydia knows. Okay, I don't have a question, but I just have comment. I took many videos of the storm drains around Lemon Grove, and I sent them to the city, and I sent them to Lydia and to Actually, I went into La Mesa, Spring Valley, El Cajon, Santee, and even Bonita, and yes, the College Avenue area. Believe Izzy when he says it's not just Lemon Grove that had that flood problem during the rain. We get a lot of runoff from San Diego and La Mesa. You wouldn't believe how much we get. For that reason, we definitely need to keep our drains clear so that part of the county's, so that as part of the county's stormwater flood control system. I hear the environmental groups are holding up some of the clearing of creeks. Oh, please. If those environmentalists want to save those bushes and trees, let them dig them up for free. And take those trees and stuff home for free, take them home. There's some palms in those creeks that are worth a lot of money. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so very much. Next, we have John L. Wood, followed by Stephanie Morris.
John L. Wood, lived here for 37 years on Central. I've got a creek behind me, and there's palm trees in it, slows the water down. Last storm, there's a bunch of reeds. Some of them are 67 feet from the ditch. Water never gets up to the field behind me. And 67 feet for the reeds move from the creek over to the street is a lot of water. The bridge over the culvert was built in 1926. I don't know what pipe goes across it, but there's a pipe that goes across it, and it's full of reeds also. The last big storm we had was quite a few years ago. There was a homeless man, he was probably in his 60s, decided to go to sleep in that culvert. He never woke up because you can't hear the water coming. A lot of people don't know that. I have a sewer easement to a pump station. It's 7 feet wide. SDG&E put a meter box in the middle of the easement. So it makes it rather difficult for me to move stuff into my backyard. I've tried to get the city to talk to SDG&E to relocate the meter box. Nobody wants to do it. That's normal. And that's been going on since the pump, and the reason the pump station's there is because when they were improving Federal Boulevard, they cut a pipe, the sewer pipe, in the middle of the day. The inspector said, oh, there's no water coming out of it. It must be abandoned. So you can't run the pipe through the creek anymore because it might burst or whatever and contaminate the water. But trying to work with SDG&E, getting the city to work with SDG&E is a real pain. Fortunately, they're going to relocate they're going to take an easement from my next door neighbor. And hopefully they'll move the meter box, but the water that comes down onto Central comes from College Grove, 94, and then down to Federal. So
Your time is up.
there's a whole lot of water coming down on Federal that we shouldn't have. But that was done in 1953 when they built Highway 94.
Thank you so very much, and so I'll check with staff to see if there are any comments now, otherwise staff can follow up with, John, afterwards.
I just want to mention that, you know, we gave that $200,000 maintenance figure for storm drainage. In addition to that, again, earthen channels are part of the drainage system. We have, funds allocated for, vegetation removal for earthen channels, and, the city budget's approximately $50,000 a year for that. And that also comes out of SB1 and, Transnet and gas tax funds. And that 50,000, for earthen channel maintenance, we have to address, Main Street channel, Bakersfield channel, there's a channel behind the businesses on Federal Boulevard, where Smith Shades, business is located, Thompson's, we own a portion of that area. And so, you know, we have to prioritize, you know, the maintenance of those earthen channels. The area that John mentioned, with regards to Central and Federal, La Mesa Glass, that business on the west side of, Central, they own, the channel, and so are responsible for the maintenance of that area. And they also own the other side, of, the culvert, approximately, I wanna say like 20 yards east, which then turns into, Toyota, Larry Miller Toyota's property. So they're responsible for that segment running east. So again, going back to that comment regarding, for many of these areas, again, the city doesn't control these areas, so it's difficult to get the homeowner, not the homeowner, but the property owner to address their maintenance responsibilities.
Thank you so very much. Next, I have Stephanie Morris, followed by Jill Bean.
Hello, thank you for your time, for setting this up for us residents. I really appreciate this. And just for the record, Madam Mayor, I would like discussion over my question and the time spent, because that's why I'm here, because I thought this was supposed to be for discussion. My question is, and I'm not sure who to address this to, is that if a private citizen has problems with their drainage system on their property, and the city says, no, yes, it's private property, you are responsible for this, and they don't have the means to fix it, right? They go through the channels and trying to get grants and loans and all this other BS that is unnecessary. What prevents them, and what's the legalities around them removing and filling in the sinkhole, or removing the pipe like that lady was saying? I don't know her name. What's the legalities around that? That's a good question. And the other question is that you have a master storm drain plan, but then you don't know where the storm drains are.
Exactly.
I'm very confused by the system here. I'm baffled. I'm baffled. So what's the legalities around that? Say I have a sinkhole and a storm drain that has collapsed on my property, and I don't have the means. Say FEMA hasn't given me enough money to fix the deal. Say it'll be $250,000. FEMA gives me $50,000. What am I supposed to do then? Can I just fill in the sinkhole, remove your bad pipe, fill in the sinkhole, and call it good? What happens to me? Thank you.
So I want to be very clear here. This is an opportunity for people to speak, and you will be able to come up, say what you have to say, and ask your question. But also staff will have an opportunity to provide what they know with you right here on the spot. But also, they'll be here afterwards to speak with you. So the conversation can continue after we are done with the formality, long after this particular moment, and maybe even days after. So I wanna make sure that staff answers those two questions. One is the legality, but also there's questions regarding the existing system and what we know and what we don't know about what's underground.
Let's address the legal issue first, and I'm gonna ask, Mr. Campion to see if he can try and answer that question without being very specific, and if there's any statute in law.
So, thank you for your question. This is going to sound like a lawyer talking right now, but in my position, as a deputy city attorney, I advise the city. And that includes city staff, elected officials, and those who are operating under the authority of the city. I'm going to be very careful what I say because I don't want it to come across that I'm giving you legal advice.
No, you're not.
And
And I asked a general question.
Yeah. And I'm going to give another legal answer, and it depends. It's very fact specific, and whether or not you doing something to your property necessarily endangers other property or puts other neighboring properties in a situation where circumstances could happen that are adverse to those properties, or properties further downstream from runoff can affect what you can do on your own property. And so a lot of these things really get into technical things that aren't lawyer questions or engineer questions. And the folks here at this table, they know how to analyze whether doing something on your property is going to have an adverse effect on neighboring properties and so forth. And then, once I have all those facts, I could look at that and say, is that legal to do that or not legal to do that? And so I would say your best bet, I know it costs money, but your best bet is to get people who really know their stuff when it comes to the technical aspects of doing something to your property and what that would result in. And I can't say you can fill a sinkhole, or you can block a pipe, or you can reroute water. I can't say that because it's very fact specific. And if I were to give more than what I've given, it would probably come across as legal advice. So I hope that gives you a sense of just sort of things to consider. But there's no hard and fast statute or case law that automatically says you can do this no matter what. It really depends on what the effects are of what you do. And there could be other environmental concerns and environmental issues.
So can't we switch that around and say the effects of what the city doesn't take care of, it affects us residents?
Again, that is a legal determination, and if there's a question, you can always file a claim.
So the second part of the question was, we're surprised about the drainage. And the answer is yes. There's a lot of private drainage that we don't know about because it wasn't on the maps that we've used. So the storm drain master plan, although it's an interwoven system, really focused on what we knew publicly. The pipes we knew that were public pipes, the inlets that we knew that were public inlets, the culverts that we knew that were culverts. In the past, if we had issues with private drainage, those were taken into consideration, but there are some drainage which I will defer to the city, the public works director, that we were even surprised existed. Because again, it wasn't in our ethos because it was private drainage and we did not know it existed. So we're doing some of the investigation along with yourselves to determine where that came from. There is a result of this particular storm that there was an earthen basin constructed, and we have no record at who constructed it. It was privately constructed, but we have no record of it being constructed, and we've gone back before the city was incorporated. So there's a lot of private infrastructure that we're still uncovering from the 22nd rains because there were no records, or people built it back in the 60s and 70s when it was the wild, wild west and folks could build anything that they want, and they didn't necessarily get permits with the county, or the county didn't find it at that given time. So, you know, sometimes we're surprised just as you.
But, quick question, if there's like a manhole like out at the street, wouldn't that tell the engineers, oh, hey, there's a storm pipe there?
And I will let the engineers ask that question, answer that question.
Yeah,
She's behind me.
I was gonna jump in just for a second, because we do a lot of citywide or countywide drainage master plans. It's a tremendous amount of effort, and I think Andrew touched on it tonight, but the first step is trying to understand what the existing system is. And no, plan of that size is gonna be able to identify every single inlet or every single pipe. But we use the tools that we have, so it's been over the last probably 20 years that municipalities have taken a stab at starting to digitize where their pipes are, where the channels are, where their inlets are, things like that. I think when we helped with the citywide drainage master plan, we took what was already digitized in GIS and started to use better LiDAR topo to understand the topography, follow the flow paths, and that helps identify where the channels are, where we would expect the water's going in terms of the storm drain system. We now have really good high-resolution aerial imagery, so we can start kind of scanning, doing a desktop analysis to identify where head walls are, going into Google Street View, right, being able to identify, oh, there's curb inlets here. So maybe the GIS system didn't have those before. We are scanning up and down streets, trying to identify where are the inlets, where, if you find inlets, you know there's gotta be a pipe, right? So then we might send somebody out in the field to pop manhole lids, try to figure out, oh, this pipe goes over to that side. So there was quite a bit of work done as part of this effort to improve the digital inventory of the existing storm drain inventory. A lot of those, and we didn't get into the legal research about whether the pipes are public or private. We're looking at it more from a hydrology and hydraulic standpoint and where the deficiencies in the systems are. So just because the pipe or an inlet shows up in the inventory doesn't necessarily mean that it is public or that it is private. You have to dive into more site-specific research to answer that question. So I just wanted to kind of cover that as well.
And if I could, these people.
Thank you so very much. What I want to do is bring to light that it is almost 8 o'clock, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speaker slips. Because this was scheduled to 8 o'clock, I want to ask everyone to be patient because I want to make sure that we hear from you. And so I will again thank you for taking your time out tonight. But we do want to get through these speaker slips. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and call on Jewel Bean, followed by Rolando Ingrid.
And if I could, the people know where the broken drains are. They want to know what we're going to do to fix them. And what they're hearing today is that the city is going to deny that they're public infrastructure. These people know exactly where the pipes are. They're not asking, they're telling you, they have broken infrastructure running through their properties. The point of this meeting is so that they can get answers about what the city is going to do regarding these broken pipes. And all this is a big smoke and mirrors show to pacify these folks who know where the issues are. They want to know what we're going to do to help them. That is why they are all here.
I will ask the elected officials, do not take away the time of the people that are here. Please allow the people to speak. Please respect the people that are in this meeting that took time out tonight so that they could be heard. You will get your opportunity to speak. Each and every one of us will get that opportunity. But do not take away from these residents. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jewel Dean, followed by Rolando Ingrid.
Hi, my name is Jewel.
Can you speak louder, please?
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a comment and then I have a couple of questions. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am Stephanie's neighbor. I live right next door to her. We have an easement in our backyard, and there's a storm drain in that easement that we're not allowed to build on. And then it runs all the way through my backyard out to the front of the front, on the sidewalk where the water flows through. So the street behind me and all the water from the street above us flows through our yard. On that storm day, the whole entire storm drain collapsed and flooded my house, flooded my yard. And now there's a huge sinkhole on the side of my house, and it's like it's maybe like 10 feet from my bedroom where I sleep and my kids sleep. And so we have been going back and forth with the city. I don't wanna go there all the way right now, but I guess I'm saying this to say that, we submitted a claim, but it doesn't look like it's gonna be accepted by the city. And so, I guess my question is, if an owner, is expected to fix or maintain their own drain, do they become liable for the public infrastructure? So the storm drain that is in my yard is serving multiple streets. It's not just our street. The easement that's said to be private behind my yard is serving the public. So how could a private easement, like, why would it be called private if it's not serving me privately? It's serving everybody. And so now I have 6 kids that live in my house. We can't play in the backyard because they might fall into the sinkhole. And nobody came to my house to check to see if it's gonna ruin the structure of my actual house, the foundation. And because, by the way that, like, how it's looking, it looks like it's gonna continue to open up alongside my house. And so, I'm just wondering if the city doesn't know another question, if the city doesn't know, which drains that are there to maintain, how, like, I'm sure that everyone here didn't not know when they bought their house that they were expected to maintain the drain that's serving everybody else. And so how can you guys as a city help the public know that when you buy this house, by the way, you're responsible for this drain that's going through your house, and like there's no awareness at all. And so how I just feel like it just feels like nobody cares. The lady back there was like in tears that her house is flooding, and it just feels like whenever we ask for help, nobody's responding, nobody's even showing that you guys care. And it's frustrating. I would have never bought a house in Lemon Grove, and I would tell everybody not to buy a house in Lemon Grove if I knew that this is how it's being handled. Like crickets, like no response, nothing. And now my house is in danger. My kids are in danger. Her house is always in danger. Like it doesn't, I don't understand. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so very much. Jill, do we have your contact info?
Mayor,
We have it. Oh, okay.
We have. Just a couple of comments, and then I'll let Lee jump in. Because this is a submitted claim, I'm gonna be very circumspect about it. But we do care, which is why we're here today. We do care, which is why it takes, because he's been spending a lot of his time